Okay, how poor people make money, how poor people spend money, and how and why poor people borrow money. So how and why do poor people make money? How and why do poor people make money? How do poor people make money? Well, how? How do poor people make money? How? Well, they exchange time for money because they believe this lie that time is money. So poor people make money by exchanging time for money. They'll say, I'll work for you for X amount of dollars an hour. And by the way, there are some middle class people who also exchange time for money, so we'll get to that in a minute. But poor people, basically one of the reasons they're poor is because their own effort over time is the only resource they have to use to make money. So if you think about wealth, as a spiritual outcome, right? Wealth, abundance. Spirit is abundant, right? Like there's no limit to spirit. It's limitless. It's abundant, right? There's so much that there's more than enough for everybody to have more than enough. There'll still be more than enough left over. It's like oxygen, right? But because wealth is a spiritual outcome, if you are using a limited, by the way, it's not only spiritual, it's an unlimited spiritual outcome. So if you look at the 4 levels of value, being the lowest level of value is implementation. The resource that you use on that level is you use your muscles over time. And in fact, I'm going to do it this way. You use your muscles over time to create wealth. So, which means you're moving something, you're lifting something, you're carrying something, you're driving something, you're fixing something, you're building something. You are using your muscles over time. Implementation is the lowest level of value. And so muscles are a what? Physical or spiritual resource? Which one? Physical. Muscles are physical. Time, limited or unlimited resource? Limited. So what you're doing is you're multiplying a physical resource times a limited resource and hoping for an unlimited spiritual outcome. This is why working for money, this is why this can never make you rich. Now, you can do this and get rich, but you won't get rich because you did that. Okay? You can do this as you are creating wealth, but you're not going to do this and get rich because you did this. So the lowest level of value, because wealth is the result of value creation, right? So the money that you make is the result of the value that you create for somebody other than yourself. I did a video a long time ago called Money is Not Wealth. And if you want to know more about that in detail, go watch the video. But money is not wealth. Well, if money is not wealth, what is wealth? Wealth is your ability to create value for someone other than yourself. The greater value that you can create for the greater number of people that are not you, the more wealth you have. Because that's what wealth is. Wealth is your ability to create value for somebody other than yourself. So this is the lowest level of value. So you multiply a limited resource times a physical resource, and then what you get is you get a limited outcome. Why? Because that's all it can produce. Everything reproduces after its own kind. And so poor people make money by selling their time. And then what do? Because oftentimes, at least this was the case when I was poor, oftentimes when you don't have enough money to do the things that you dream about, what you do is when you come home from working for money is you anesthetize yourself by doing activities that don't have the ability to make your life better, like watching TV, like drinking a can of beer, like hanging out with your buddies at the bar, like joining a bowling league. There's nothing wrong with joining a bowling league. There's nothing wrong with, in of itself, watching television. Unless you're broke, right? Then the television is an electronic income reducer. So what happens is we anesthetize ourselves. What do I mean? We attempt to alleviate our pain by either drowning it in some substance or watching somebody else live a fake life vicariously on the electronic income reducer. So what we could do instead with that discretionary time is we could have some discretion and do something during that time that's not going to be exchanging time for money. We could learn a new skill during our discretionary time. We could build some new relationships with some different people during our discretionary time, right? And so we could build a system with our discretionary time. So how poor people make money is by exchanging time for money. Why do poor people make money? Poor people make money for one reason. So if you look at my concept in Trash Man to Cash Man of the financial house, right? You've got your income window, right? Most people get their income from their job. This is the trade time for money. So that's these people. So the income comes into the income window. Then you have your IPA window. And then down here you have your outgo window. And then up here, in here, you have your, over here you have your WRL window. So IPA, what's that stand for? Income producing assets. Poor people don't have any income producing assets. That's why they're poor. They are their only asset. Wealth reducing liabilities. Well, they don't have good enough credit to have a lot of wealth reducing liabilities, so they don't really have a lot of those either. Maybe a car, maybe they own their own house. But the primary purpose of a poor person making money is to pay bills. Do you like your job? What do people say? What do poor people say when you ask them, do you like your job? I gotta pay the bills. Think about it. That's what I used to say. You gotta pay the bills. So it doesn't matter if I like my job or not, I gotta pay the bills. So I'm gonna go do this work that I don't wanna do because I gotta pay the bills. Okay, cool. So this is how poor people make money. This is how, why poor people make money. And then when it comes to borrowing money, how and why do poor people borrow money? This is really sad. And I know this because I used to be poor. How do poor people borrow money? Poor people, when they borrow money, poor people borrow money. Poor people. People borrow at high interest rates. In fact, I'm just going to put that at high interest rates, HIR, high interest rates, and that looks like a B, but it's an R, trust me. Okay, so high interest rates, and they borrow money to buy depreciating liabilities. And oftentimes, because they generally don't have good credit, they get intro credit cards with higher interest rates, like 24% or higher, 28%. Or, I don't know if any of y'all remember this, like if you have bad credit, you can start building your credit by, I don't know if any of y'all remember that, you get the Fingerhut catalog, you order some stuff on Fingerhut. Anybody remember that? Anybody on YouTube remember that? And so what happens is you buy stuff on Fingerhut they'd sell it to you on credit, charge you an insane interest rate, but then you start developing some credit. And then you get a Sears card or a JCPenney's card or a Boscov's card if you live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right? And so you get your department store cards, and then all of a sudden you work up and you get a Visa card. It's got an $800 limit on it, and you're like so excited because I got a Visa card. And then you go buy a bunch of junk, and then you're late, and your credit's still bad. So borrowing money for poor people is generally a trap because they don't have a strategy for borrowing money. They're just borrowing money to buy stuff that they don't have the money for. Not a good idea. This is how poor people make money. This is why poor people make money. This is how poor people use credit. And why they use credit is because they want stuff that they can't afford to buy. Okay, well, that's not where you want to be. Like, you don't want to be buying stuff out of a Fingerhut catalog. No shade to Fingerhut. I mean, they gave me my first opportunity to buy stuff on credit. Okay, so you don't want to use the Fingerhut catalog. So, middle class people. Let's look at middle class people. Why and why do middle class people borrow money? So, middle class people make money by same thing. They either sell their time, right? Selling their time, just like, and they may have some investments, some small investments. Middle class people don't have a lot of investments, some small investments. They might invest in a little Airbnb, or they might invest in a couple of stocks, and they're saving towards retirement. The objective of making money for middle class people, financial house again, they got their income window from their job, right? And they have a very small IPA window. They got a couple of investments in there, and they have really good credit. They pay their bills on time, so then they can buy wealth reducing liabilities that make them look rich. Because then, at least people won't know that I don't have money. So I'm going to buy a more expensive car than I need, and I'm going to live in a more expensive neighborhood than I need to live in, and I'm going to buy designer clothes. I'm going to do all of this on credit. And so what happens with middle class people, and then you have the outgo window, is they borrow money to buy stuff, and they pay their bills on time, and so they accumulate a bunch of stuff that becomes worth less over time, and then that goes out the door in the form of bills. So poor middle class people are focused on building their credit to buy things. I use credit cards. I don't use debit cards. I'm going to get to that strategy in a minute. I'm going to show you, when I show you why, the reason rich people borrow money is very different than the reason poor people borrow money. Okay? So this is why, this is how they make money. They sell their time, and they might even get a salary. Maybe they're not selling their time by the hour, they may have a salary, right? And now they make even less money than they'd make if they were selling their time for money. And so then what happens is they do this so they can build up a lot of credit. They borrow a lot of money. Some of them still have college debt, so they might be a little bit more educated, but it's going to take them 20 years to pay off their college debt. And so they're working all this time for this magical time in the future called retirement. I don't even know. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, retirement. I don't even know any rich people who desire to retire. Like, I'm 63 years old. Are you going to retire in 2 years? Retire and do what? Like, what am I going to do when I retire? Sit around and do nothing? Like, why is that inspiring to people? Like, why is that an aspiration? I want to get to a place where I don't have to work for money. Well, get to a place where you don't have to work for money, but like, don't wait to do that. You can stop working for money now and start working for other reasons now. Like, I work to build relationships. I work to build systems. I work to learn new skills. I don't work for money. The money's just a byproduct of creating a lot of value for other people. Okay, so poor people, middle class people, they borrow money and then they pay their bills on time, but they don't ever really just pay off I'm not debt free, but I pay my credit cards off every month. I have no desire to be debt free. In fact, in 2025, I fully expect to accumulate hundreds. Where do your values come from? The people in this room, the people on this YouTube, watching me on YouTube right now, where do your values come from? There are 3 places values come from that come to mind, like top of mind. Are you ready? Number 1, values come from past perceived voids. Past perceived voids create present pursued values. Past perceived voids, what does that mean? That means something that you felt like was missing in your past. You desire that. That's valuable to you because you always desired it but never had it. So I remember when I was a kid, my good friend Stan, his brother Lonnie had a 68 Pontiac GTO. I love that car. I wanted to buy it from him. He wouldn't sell it to me. I love that car so much. I'm like, I want a 68 Pontiac GTO. It's a car I've always wanted. I know that sounds crazy. Like, why would you want a 68 Pontiac? Because you drive down the road, it does this thing, of millions of dollars of debt. And I know that's, like, when I say that, that's like, what did you just say? Yeah, that's what I said. For a whole bunch of reasons. Wait till I get to it. So that's middle class people. But let's get to the part that we've all been waiting for. Rich people and debt. Why do rich people borrow money? Rich people, debt. Why do rich people borrow money? Well, first of all, before we do that, let's talk about how rich people make money. How do rich people make money? Well, we don't make money by selling our time, okay? And we may sell some of our time, but it's not what we do to create wealth. So how do rich people make money? Here's how we create money, and here's why we create money. How we create money is by creating value for others. Now, that may sound kind of esoteric, so I'm going to break it down to you. So, what do I mean when I say creating value for others? First of all, you can't create value for someone until what? You know what's valuable to someone. So the first thing I've got to do is I've got to discover what's valuable to you. If I know what's valuable to you, then I've got at least got a chance of creating value for you, right? So, what creates value? Where do values come from? Like,